So good afternoon, good morning, depends on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us for our session, which is going to be looking at how AfricaLics as a network is enhancing transformative research and policy. We are going to be joined by 4 people, myself and Magretha Anderson, and we will have 2 discussants, Kareb and Imran, who are going to be speaking to us, responding to what we are going to be presenting, myself and Magretha. And after that, we are going to have a Q&A session where we are going to open up the discussion to the audience. Be free and feel free to share your comments. Post them on the chat so that when we are done with the setting the scene, we should be able to get back to the discussion. So mine is just to welcome everybody this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you are. And thank you so much for finding time to join us. For those who may not be very familiar with AfricaLics, just to remind us who we are. We are a network of innovation scholars who are, looking into studying innovation and development issues, but with a focus on Africa. We are the Globerics chapter in Africa. We are just about 10 years old. This year, we are celebrating our 10 years since the network was launched in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania in 2012. Our major objective is basically to promote the development of STI, research capacity in Africa, and trying to make that research to be relevant to the policymakers and all the other stakeholders who are relevant in enhancing the national innovation systems in respective countries. We had a very ambitious goal to enable African countries to develop the capacity to fully monitor and evaluate their innovation systems using the evidence that is emerging from their different contexts. We endeavor to basically become a strong research capacity building network, as well as a very active research network. We have had quite a number of activities in the last almost 10 years, and those activities are basically geared to building that capacity that we want to see in Africa. And those particular activities are, spanning across quite a number of, areas, starting with the PhD academies. We are also having research conferences. We do have teaching and learning activities, as well as other, activities. But the main one is the Visiting Fellows Program, where we are having basically a long, stint where the PhD scholars, from across Africa, they spent some time at Oborg University, trying to develop their skill in this particular area. So yes, we are going to be speaking about some of those activities, and as we discuss, what the network is doing to enhance, transformation change and learning within Africa. But for now, I would want to just mention just a few activities that we are targeting this year, which are quite critical in enhancing, the transformative agenda. The PhD Academy in 2022 is going to be happening in Nairobi. It's 2 weeks resident activity. At the VFP, we've already recruited, scholars, a cohort for 2021-2022 period. and they are going to be coming to Africa. Previously, we used to host the fellowship program at Aalborg in Denmark, but now we are coming to Africa. So it's going to become an African, based, program. We do have the conference taking place this year in Cameroon, and we are hoping that we can bring the the francophone scholars in Cameroon, but also joined by other Anglophone scholars. The mentoring activities are becoming increasingly important because we have realized we need to mentor our scholars to be able to, receive the skills that they require to be able to enhance their areas, their area wherever they are, whether they are researchers or practitioners. We are trying to embrace mentoring as one way to do this. We are going to be looking again into, focusing much more on engaging a wider stakeholder. It's particularly the policymakers and other researchers in the academic settings. And we have already started doing this, through webinars. COVID has actually, been a blessing in a disguise, because we have been able to engage, without having to meet physically. And that way we are able to bring stakeholders who are very, very keen and relevant in joining us to push the innovation and development agenda in Africa. And of course, now we should be able to be looking at the transformative agenda, which requires all the stakeholders to be involved. So this is something which we are going to continue doing this year. We are also trying to implement, a long-term strategy for networking. And then, of course, this is going to make sure that we include key stakeholders like the development partners to be able to have their voice, contributing to the capacity building agenda, as well as the transformative agenda for Africa. AfricaLics is growing, and therefore we need to see how we can strengthen the institutional, infrastructure to be able to enhance, the sustainability, as well as to making sure that the learning that we are gaining is going to be shared and cascaded, across the different stakeholders. And therefore, within the AfricaLics Scientific Board, we are discussing a new institutional infrastructure, which we are calling hub and spoke model, which is trying to expand, the reach and to bring all the other stakeholders who have not been quite active in the process. And therefore, we look forward to an engaging discussion. And my colleague, Magretha, plus our discussants are going to help us to have a lively discussion. So welcome, everybody. And thank you so much once again for joining us. Over to you, Magretha.
Much. And also from my side, a big warm welcome to everybody, and thanks for joining us today. We thought we would focus the discussion this afternoon on two key questions. So the first is, how should inclusive and transformative change be understood in the African context? How do we see it? And then, of course, there will be room for you to disagree or agree. And secondly, how can and how should AfricaLics contribute to inclusive and transformational or transformational change in Africa and in the world? And now, somehow I can't go to the next slide. Oh, it worked very well before. Here we are. Can you see it now? Natalie, I hope it is okay. So I first wanted to mention a few AfricaLics contributions to transformative action so far. And the first and probably the most important part is that we've been trying to raise awareness and research capacity for research on innovation and development. So not just kind of research in new inventions, but also on what actually makes a society highly innovative and successful in bringing about change. And with this, we're not talking just about economic growth and so on, but also the more directional aspects. So taking into account climate change and different crises, as was mentioned, as the TIPC network is actually also doing. We've also been transformative in the sense that we've been supporting more female scholars in the field of innovation and development, having approximately 50% of the participants in the visiting fellowship program actually being female scholars. We've contributed to changes in the curriculum of different African institutions, universities primarily, through the introduction of modules and a few full master's and PhD programs on innovation and development. And in this, we have been using student-centered learning methods such as the problem-based learning and other methods, which I actually think in themselves are also transformative. Then finally, I wanted to mention that we have been trying to increase the opportunities for researchers to meet and discuss state-of-the-art of research on innovation and development. And this we've been doing mainly through the conferences and the academies where senior and junior scholars are meeting each other. We had an external evaluation done last year, and that's available now on the AfricaLics website if you want to look at it and familiarize yourself with it. So what do we understand by inclusive and transformative change in Africa? Inclusive and transformative change is basically, we think, change that offers sustainable jobs and equal opportunities for all. So including all genders, ethnic groups, youth, and future generations, contributing to reduced poverty and inequalities in specific countries and across the continent. And this is, of course, not something that we can do alone or that we think we should do alone. It's a collective effort that needs to take into account also global power relations. The second part of the definition here is that inclusive and transformative change is change that takes into account the specific climatical and environmental conditions and resources in various African countries, while contributing to solving global crises such as those related to biodiversity, climate change, and now lately also pandemics. So this is how we understand inclusive and transformative change. You could then ask, how can we contribute further to these types of changes? And we think that at least in 2022 and onwards, we will hopefully be able to do much more distribution of research results from the network and the members of the network that focus on inclusive and transformative change. We also hope to increase the focus on inclusive and transitional change in calls for conferences, academies, and maybe other activities. Some of our conferences have actually already in the past focused on these issues. On inclusiveness has always been kind of a theme for in some of the papers, for instance, from a gender perspective. And there are members of the network that have been working on environmental and climate change issues for many years. So, for instance, both Anne Kingiri and myself are members of the IRIC project, which has just come out with a book that actually deals with transformational change. Another or third option is to develop learning and teaching materials that contribute to our understanding of inclusive and transformational change. We believe that this is something we need to continue doing. And finally, encourage members of the network to develop joint research projects that focus on how inclusive and transitional change can be realized. And this is, I hope, something that Caleb will talk about shortly. I'm going to stop sharing slides, but just before I do that, I want to say that we now have two discussants coming in, Dr. Caleb from Nigeria, an assistant director, and we have Imran Patel. And after that, there will be discussions based on the chat. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I
Thank
don't
you
know whether
very
you can
much.
hear me.
Oh, of course I can. Thank you very much for the presentation. Thanks to Han and Margaret for the presentation, and a warm welcome again to all our audience. Yeah, the program and the project of the AfricaLics had actually been presented to us as they try as much as possible to build capacity on the continent, particularly as it relates to science, technology, and innovation management, and innovation and development, as the case may be. I just want to make few remarks on the background of how innovation, how science, technology, and innovation actually drives development on the continent, and also the need for AfricaLics to actually do more, and the areas that they need to do more, particularly looking at the transformative innovation policy engagement that they are trying to foster collaboration on. And then I made few remarks as to suggestion for the future. So first and foremost, we all understand that science, technology, and innovation have been established as the key driver of economic development. And in fact, the current SDG, that's Sustainable Development Goals, and then the process to use science and technology to drive even that SDG that are articulated even in the Green Book, has shown that yes, it is important that capacity is built across Africa so as to couple knowledge even to development. The era of doing research for research sake is long gone, because we need to target or direct the research even towards development. And technology trajectory has equally shown, or has shown that that is the way to go even on the continent. Nations that have done well in terms of driving development using STI resources have been able to do that using a directed policy, that is science, technology, and innovation policy. And of course, this policy has been a guide even to actions and behavior of elements within the system towards harnessing value from the resources to attain global development. Global in the sense that global at the global level goals, and then must be brought down even to the national development, and so as to, for the institutions within the national government to actually develop strategy towards attaining that. And one of the fundamental policies that we have seen in the past, particularly on the continent and globally, is the economic or industrial policy. So some nations have actually moved beyond the development of STI policy towards innovation policy, just innovation, to ensure that yes, the R&D that are conducted in the laboratories translate even to goods and services on the markets, and thereby improve economic life. So STI therefore provide a critical guide to and harmonizing national STI resources for development. And as we have known that, yes, STI is good for STI policy is good for development, then we need to build capacity to actually develop this policy in a robust manner, such that everyone will be carried along in an inclusive manner. And designing this policy, as we know, is multidisciplinary in nature, is transdisciplinary as well, such that you bring so many people, expert from diverse disciplines together to actually come up with this. And on the African continent, these institutions are not really there as at the time, at a point in time. And we also understand that most of the universities on the continent are not, they don't train even on building capacity for policy design, evaluation, and review. So at the point, particularly in Nigeria per se, an institution was set up around 82 to actually coordinate the STI policy, STI activities, even in the country. Likewise, we have SESTI in South Africa here, we have STEPRI in Ghana, we have STIPRO also in Tanzania. So all of these institutions, they are not higher education institutions where the produce graduates and the like. So, and yet we need to build capacity of the policymakers, of the middle to high level managers in the area of coupling science, technology, and innovation, even for development. So, and then AfricaLics becomes so GlobalLics at the global level, and then AfricaLics becomes so handy, even creating opportunity, even to provide platform, even to build capacity, particularly in STI and development on the continent. And the key highlight of what AfricaLics are actually doing have been itemized, particularly the AfricaLics Academy, the Visiting Fellowship Program, conferences, book projects in terms of bringing people together across countries on the continent to ensure that, yes, they learn to do innovation and development research that can actually inform policy in each of the countries on the continent. And also one fundamental intervention from AfricaLics as well as articulated today is the curriculum development, trying to bring faculty members together, across institutions in Africa to build their capacity in terms of how to design curriculum for innovation and development research on the continent, which is very important going forward to build capacity. And also the engagement with the policymaker is also very fundamental. But I'll still touch on that later. So also engaging, of course, the policymaker, training the trainers program of AfricaLics has also helped a lot. And in the recent time, the hub that was mentioned, the Nigeria Leaks hub, just to further enhance capacity building in the area of innovation and development. So they created a hub in the West Africa sub-region. We have Nigeria Leaks. I wouldn't know whether there are others that are coming up in the future. So all of these initiatives are actually put in place to ensure that, yes, capacity are built in the area of innovation and development for Africa. And also, I think recently they also have an institution that will be running innovation and development program even in Kenya, which is a laudable idea, that instead of taking people to Denmark for the training, we can have the training even on the continent and then further enhance capacity on the continent. So linking these even to the transformation or transformative innovation policy. So the AfricaLics and the TIPC, they need to, work together, as the case may be, to deepen their interaction through co-creation of policy-oriented projects and programs to further enhance researchers' capacity in transformative change on the continent. And to do this, they can actually leverage on the vast majority of the beneficiary of the AfricaLics program, which they have, like those who have benefited in the past. You can use them even to train and to mentor others, which are part of the initiatives that have been ongoing. Even with them, they can further strengthen that and to enrich even the network. And also the capacity building and program in the area of policy monitoring and evaluation is very key on the continent. There is largely inadequate capacity on the to evaluate policy programs on the continent. Recently, in Nigeria, we just reviewed the science, technology, and innovation policy with the assistance of UNESCO at the time. So it is important for us so that we can begin to do our things, even ourselves, on the continent. And next to that, at the national level, let me quickly wrap up with one more point. So at the national level, institutional training And capacity building program for the policymaker is very germane, even to the attainment of the much needed transformative and inclusive change in our society. So the policy, engaging the policymaker, even through the expert within the network, is very important. Bringing people together, experts together, to begin to look at the policies across the region to ensure that, yes, they are well aligned even to the development agenda on the continent is very key. So thank you very much.
Okay, I think then it's over to Imran.
Imran can pick it up from there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb, and my fellow panelists. I hope you can hear me. I want to focus on in terms of thinking through the kind of programs that AfricaLics can do on the South African example in terms of capacity building. There are some important conclusions that we've come to in the last 5 years as we work very closely to build a transformative innovation policy program in South Africa. The first is that we've identified a number of different communities. Clearly, the one that is common, and it's come, it's taken off in quite a big way, and that's the science, technology, and innovation community, policy community. A lot more effort in that regard, a lot more players. In the South African context, we had already a very strong science, technology and innovation system with organizations like the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the NRF. But over the last decade, we've also introduced new institutions that were targeted at the innovation agenda a lot more clearly, like the Technology Innovation Agency, and in universities, offices of technology transfer, etc. So the whole community of innovation practitioners, I think, improved, and that's the kind of first audience. Obviously, that community is very steeped in science, technology, and innovation, but as a critique, some of them have a very normative view around science, technology, and innovation. Sometimes overemphasizing how on its own science, technology, and innovation can make the kind of transformative change that we needed to go through. So there was a process of going through a learning about how is it that we can guide science, technology, and innovation policy in a much more focused way. And that's where issues like directionality, etc., have come into play. The second group of people who we have discovered, particularly over the last 6 years, in my own experience, having been at the Department of Science and Innovation for more than a decade, has been the increasing acknowledgement by what I call sector departments around the power of science, technology, and innovation. Whether these are in ministries of agriculture or ministries of environment, very importantly ministries of trade and industry, the understanding of the power and the need to mobilize innovation has kind of really stepped up on the agenda. However, many of the sector departments, I don't think, have a deep understanding of how science and technology and innovation, particularly, I would rather speak about knowledge and innovation as opposed to science, technology, and innovation, how knowledge and innovation can be made to work for their sector priorities, whether it's energy, etc. And I think the science, technology, and innovation community has a lot more understanding, particularly with projects like the TIPC, where there's a strong emphasis on experimentation, on learning and reflection, etc. The ability for science and technology ministries to be able to experiment, learn, fail. When you're in a policy department, a sector department, there's very different risks, dangers, pressures on you. But that's a very separate, that's another group. The third key player, three groups, key constituency are researchers. and researchers across the board, both experts in science, technology, and innovation policy, and experts in sector policies, etc. So the way we designed the transformative innovation policy work was, in a way, to be conscious of all of these stakeholder groupings and understand their different requirements, and to start building a program. When in its early stages, it takes a long time to do this, and I would like to use this opportunity to thank Anne's colleagues at the UJ under the Trilateral Research Chair, and we have an institution called CESTI at the HSRC who've been working with us to do this. So if you look at those three constituencies, we had to focus on what I call a broadening and a deepening strategy. Firstly is to deepen where we had people, a very close group of people who've gone through and have taken the time to understand the concepts, to have a stronger focus on a theory-based approach to practice, and to deepen their understanding of transformative innovation policy, etc. At the same time as broadening out this community of practice. Identifying people in other sectors, in other policy experiments, and sometimes this has taken us into spaces which we wouldn't have normally gone into, projects that we were unfamiliar with, because as a Department of Science and Innovation, we had a particular understanding around transformative innovation, very technologically based, and this has allowed us to open up a whole range of partnerships. So the reason why I raised these two concepts of the different constituencies, line function, people who are in particular areas like energy and agriculture, science and technology and research, is because in some way the real value of the capacity building comes from the intersection of these three players. Where I would kind of think about the future, and this is maybe something that can be considered in the AfricaLics approach as well, is that what I have found very useful was this concept of socio-technical system change, and to identify and use socio-technical systems as an organizing framework to build capacity in a very directed way. What I mean by this is, for example, there are bodies existing, for example, in the development community around rural development or agricultural development. These communities are active, they're vibrant, they have a certain language, a set of approaches, etc. But they're weakly linked to the science, technology, and innovation community. And in some ways, to build the networks between these, to infuse both the science, technology, and innovation thinking, particularly as an agent for transformation with these communities. But in order to do that, obviously, you need to organize around particular areas where we understand that there is a need for significant transformation in the continent. We also have the advantage in the continent that we have an ability to leapfrog in many instances, and is to organize transformative innovation around those areas. And an area that I'm very particularly keen on is off-grid solutions, on new approaches to delivering kind of basic needs like energy, like connectivity, etc. And we saw this through the example of how mobile telephony took on a very different spin in the community. So in broad terms, the only experience I can share is the kind of, for now, the South African one. We want to work with a lot more stronger in enhancing kind of the Africa Hub program. But part of this is to focus on, like I said, science and technology practitioners, people who are in the line function, and researchers, and to find opportunities for bringing those things together. We have some examples which I can share if people are interested around how we are beginning to do this, for example, in the energy space, where we're then able to bring in, using the kind of transformative innovation policy approach, not only industry, but new entrants from the private sector into a new energy space. So let me leave it at that for now, and then we'll see where the questions and the comments take us.
Thank you very much. And do you want to read aloud some of the questions, or do you want me to say a few words about what is going on in the chat? I
I can still be heard, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. We don't have so many questions, but we have some acknowledgement in terms of what participation in this conference by some people, which is great. The reason why they feel this is a good platform, because they argue that we need to network, because networking would help us to kind of expand what we are doing and to be able to learn and perhaps even complement what others are doing. I have seen that. There is a question from Johan. He's actually acknowledging that yes, networking is critical, is key, and therefore AfricaLics has done well to reach out to TIPC and others who are participating to be able to kind of learn from each other. He asked, I think the major challenge, I'm reading the question, one of the question he's asked, which I think is a very critical question to focus on. And it has been touched by our two discussants. It relates to the challenge which Africa has to include the power of informal innovation and informal actors into the transformative change process. And he's asking whether there's any experience that we do have in Africa in this regard. And I think all of us would perhaps have got something to say about it. And I know Imran has already alluded to how that is happening in South Africa. Kareb has experience in Nigeria. Maybe they could contribute to answering that question briefly.
Okay.
Can start with the Kareb, and then we can go to Imran.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Actually, it's a very good question. The recent, I mentioned or cited the example of the innovation policy we just reviewed in Nigeria. The earlier one, during the course of the formulation, there was some of the institutions, particularly the informal sector, that had been left out. And now, in the course of evaluating the policy, in fact, they themselves came up that yes, they were excluded from the earlier policy, and this time they need to have a stake even in the policy, which of course accommodated them. And how did that happen? You know, the policy was actually formulated based on, the quadruple helix approach, where all actors were brought together to discuss the policy before it was actually ratified. So at this stage, they have a representative from the informal association. So through that, they were able to lend their voice even to the new policy. And fortunately for them, last 2019, before the pandemic, at the National Center for Technology Management, we just wrap up the assessment of innovation in the informal sector. So some of the issues that they were raising actually to be included in the policy had been found even during the field work. I mean, during the data analysis. So it was easy even to incorporate even their
Yeah, thank you, Kareb. And Imran, maybe just a brief intervention.
most of the enterprises even here on the continent are actually in the informal sector. So that is the way we integrate them or integrated them into the hello?
Yeah, we can. You are
Hello?
breaking a bit, but now we hear you.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you, but just wind up your contribution so that we can give others some time to contribute.
Imran.
So you are done?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. So they were able to get their input through the fieldwork and through their deliberate efforts in approaching even the appropriate institution that, yes, they must have a part even in the STI policy that is currently being considered by the government. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Imran, then we can go to a broader discussion,
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. You can hear?
Yeah,
You can
just
hear me?
a quick, I prefer to think of, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
thanks, Anne. To start off, I prefer to think about not informal in that sense, because the informal can be formal or organized. I prefer to think about it outside of the mainstream. And this requires some effort and some support. So in the case of some of the initiatives that we're putting in place under a framework called Innovation for Inclusive Development, is a kind of a targeted focus on what we call grassroots innovators, people who are based in the community, who for whatever reason are a bit disconnected from the formal system of science, technology, and innovation, whether it's the universities, etc., but who have good ideas. So we have this program run through the Technology Innovation Agency where we put out calls, people send through their ideas, etc. One of the things to understand around the informal is that people don't have the time and the space and the social capital to be able to advance their innovation. So the design of the program now is to provide them with support, but also with funding support in the form of a stipend for a period of 12 months to enhance their kind of innovation. So that's the first way of connecting. The second is to use the formal, to use the university network to create what we call living labs or fab labs, etc., to provide people with access, kind of people in communities, informal, who are outside of the mainstream. That's why not the kind of informal. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is we've been doing some research work, and I think Erica shared in the chat group that I saw some of the work that she's been doing around the informal. We've also done a study with SESTI in Sweet Waters to understand how, for example, small businesses are able to get their inspiration, are able to adopt new practices, new technologies, etc. And for me, that's part of this rubric of what is happening, and as I think identified by all speakers, will play a bigger role as compared to our northern neighbors in terms of driving positive change, leveraging the power of new technologies, but also new approaches. One last comment I want to make, which was a project that I wanted to share, but I don't have the time, is that in this environment, we also need to look at business models. We have a project for community-based internet provision, and there you also need to think very carefully about how to make this work for non-mainstream actors as an economic activity, etc. So it calls for different ways of thinking about the business model. Thanks.
Okay, I think we do not have a lot of time left, but there's a lot of engagement on the chat, responses, to questions, and participants actually responding to each other's, comments, which is great. Yeah, so, but because we don't have time, I think this is interesting. But maybe before we go to Magreda to respond quite a bit about what is being discussed, I would want probably to throw the question back to the audience and ask, how do we define informal innovation? And I know quite a lot of scholarly materials have been written, and we have seen on the chart, a lot of work has been done by the Globerics and AfricaLics community in this regard. But I think that in the context of transformative innovation and transformative change, I think we need to rethink how we define the concept of innovation, the concept of informal innovation. Imran has actually spoken about the way in the contextually how grassroots innovation also could be perceived to be informal innovation, and of course informal innovations across a wide range of sectors. So I think that's a question we can throw back to the audience to start thinking about in terms of how we can engage in this transformative innovation space. And the issue that was raised by the two discussants today, that relates to the need to build capacity to be able to actually interrogate this particular space in this particular subject. So I would request Margareta to perhaps maybe try to summarize what we have discussed, and then perhaps come up with one or two take-home issues that we need to ponder on, even as we continue to engage beyond this particular session. Over to you, Margareta.
Thank you very much. No, and that's a tall order to fill, but but I think the discussion in the chat has been extremely useful and interesting, raising a lot of questions regarding the informal issues and issues related to informal innovation in Africa, and that is maybe one. It is definitely something that has already been the focus of. It was the focus of one of our first AfricaLics supported seed-funded projects that Erica was deeply involved in. So you could say that AfricaLics has in some ways already contributed to that. I also think that the inclusive development issue, innovation for inclusive development, is actually very implicit and could probably be even more explicitly talked about in our calls for the conferences and for academies and so on. But it is something that you can almost go through everything, and you will see that people are actually focusing a lot on these inclusive aspects. And Imran, you mentioned the need to develop new business models. I think that's also been the core subject for some of this research here. Certainly in the new book from the IREC project, there's a lot of there's a whole chapter by Rob Byrne and Karderleinen about innovative ways of using solar energy in East Africa that brings a lot of stuff up. I think that we could, we have, as Anne mentioned, there will be a conference if COVID-19 allows and everything in Cameroon later in 2022, and we could actually engage and discuss more and with the organizers of the conference and see if some of the good points that are being brought up in the chat here and the discussion today could actually be part of the call. We have, in previous years, when we've been able to conduct face-to-face conferences, we've always had a teaching track. So, Caleb, you were mentioning earlier also the importance of the training of trainers. I think that you're referring back to an event that we had in 2016, which actually was building on a module for innovation that is still available on the AfricaLics website under resources. And it kind of brings to the table a lot of student-centered learning methods for how to teach innovation and development. It has been taken up by some institutions, but not many. And we want in the phase 3 of AfricaLics, we really want to put even more emphasis on the institutionalization of teaching in the field of innovation and development, which we regard as a prerequisite for actually kind of building also the research capacities. Because if you don't have scholars that are kind of into the field from the beginning of their studies and so on, then it also becomes a very, very big challenge to get them into the right level or right mood when they come to a PhD level, for instance. So we need to work more on the pipeline issue. to build research capacity. And we need indeed also to strengthen the links to the policymakers. And I think, Imran, thanks a lot for joining us today. It's been very useful to hear your insights. And yeah, I think we, as a network, we look very much forward to continuing discussions with the TIPC members, or members of TIPC, to see what we can do jointly. And I don't know whether you want to, or anybody else want to add something from here. Sorry, we can't make Erica or some of the other good people talk directly. I was actually quite disappointed about that. I thought we would be able to just click and say, yes, you can come on now. But Erica, do you want, or somebody else, please post your comments to what I just said in the chat. You'll be very, very, yeah, it'll be very welcome. And otherwise, I'm sure there will be other occasions.
Thank you, Margaret. That's, I think there's a lot that we can discuss, but 1 hour, you must agree with me, it's not enough. And then the impossibility of bringing on board some of our audiences who actually are very much experienced, and they are participating in what is happening. It's difficult to bring them on board, but at least they have been posting, a lot of stuff, which I think we can take away with us home. Maybe final concluding comments or remarks from our audience, because we only have, I think, 5 minutes now. So any parting shots, Kareb and Imran?
No, just from my side is to kind of re-emphasize that this is not a short-term journey, and I think the things are pointing in the right direction. I can see a lot happening, having been in the science, technology, and innovation space, and I think the science, technology, and let me talk about the innovation policy community has a real opportunity to use their experience and understanding to shape the kind of what is happening in various sectors. And I think that's very positive. The whole SDGs and the placing of innovation at the center of those development challenges creates a real opportunity for all of us. So I think the future is bright for both AfricaLics, GlobalX, and for the TIPC and other missions work.
Thank you very much. A parting shot from here. So thank you for this wonderful program that you have already, that we have today. It's a great outing. So I just want to re-emphasize the need for AfricaLics to do more. I know they've been doing very well in terms of co-creation of policy-oriented projects and programs to further enhance researchers' capacity on transformation change or transformative change. This will lead us even to the attainment of the Africa we want, that is the AU Agenda 2063. So with the cooperation of all and all the partners, we I think with AfricaLics, we are quite prepared even to take the challenge and push the continent even further in the frontiers of knowledge and technology. So thank you so very much.
So I think what is remaining is just to apologize, because we cannot articulate a response to all the comments that have been raised. But of course, those comments have served a very good purpose to help us to start a conversation, because we have agreed that this is a journey, as Imran has said, and we cannot walk this journey alone. We all need to work together, because the journey towards transformative change, it is an all-inclusive journey, and we are going to actually work together, and this is just a beginning. We want to appreciate all those who have been able to join. I can't see who has joined us, but I from the chat, the engagement, I can conclude we are having a very engaged audience, but not to to discourage you from continuing with this discussion. We are actually jumping into another session, networking session, which we invite you to join so that we can continue with this conversation there. But of course, we do have a whole week to engage on this particular topic, particularly, issues that relate to transformative change and innovation policy in the context of Africa, and what can actually, how can transformative change be enhanced, for Africa development. That's how Kareb has put it. And what role can all the stakeholders who Imran is alluding to, all the constituencies of communities, how can they be brought, on board to also participate in this process? So with that, without much ado, that just to thank everybody and my panelists, Imran, Kareb, and Magreda, for joining us and making this particular session to be that engaging. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Anna.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everybody. And Johan, I think we need to talk to the